Hello, 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 and welcome to The Long Road Podcast. The journey goes ever on with The Long Road. This episode, Kev gets his power tools out. As The Long Road look forward to our impending American Wilderness Odyssey UK tour, we have a chat about what makes a great gig as a performer or as an audience member, and those magical moments that sometimes crop up. Steve Bonham takes us on a trip to Nowhere Town, his latest new song, and Kev Moore picks up his Camino trail the very next day after his epic 35-kilometre slog, and the Bishop, that's me, I talk us through the therapy of making croissant. The Long Road Podcast is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. If those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, we're celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you join us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris, the Bishop Lydon. Welcome back to another slice of silliness from The Long Road. Fabulous to have you with us, wherever in the world you are right now. The eagle-eyed amongst you have spotted that we've gone back to the very original name of the podcast, The Long Road Podcast. You know, it's just simpler all round. Now, it takes the sort of podcast technology around the world a little while to catch up, so some places you might still see the old name for a little while, or the old imagery, but hopefully it will all filter through soon enough. Now, not long until The Long Road are on tour across the UK. We're in the Midlands, the North, the South East, the South West. Check out the tour dates and all the ticket purchasing information at thelongroadband.net/gigs. And if we're coming to a venue near you, please do try and support us if you can. Now, other news, our own Kev Moore has a new radio slot presenting 2 hours of classic rock, a topic that Kev is deeply knowledgeable on. So check that out on Mondays at 11 p.m. UK time at 365radio.co. And you can check out previous shows at mixcloud.com/365radio. Now, don't forget, if you like what we do as a band, you might consider buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thelongroadband. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to me. Greetings, The Long Road are back together again for another of our digital chats. We've got Steve at home in Derbyshire. Steve, hello.
Hey up me duck.
Hey up me duck. An old favourite of a welcome there. Good. And we've got Kev at home in Spain. How you doing, Kev?
Hujambo.
Right. Tell us about that.
Well, that's Swahili, an oft-used greeting in Kenya. Obviously, I use it on a regular basis.
Well, I think you've used it on the podcast before, because it did ring a bell, actually. And when you said Swahili, that rang a bell.
Yes,
so maybe I'll have to dig out in the archives which previous episode it was, and people can refer back. How are you both doing this week?
Well, you know, I'm hanging on and ploughing through the inferno that is our Spanish summer.
Yeah.
I was looking, Kev, are you doing building works in this heat?
I am. And it's a strange phenomenon, is that you start sliding around in your own perspiration, because all the floors here are tiled, and you're kneeling down trying to do things, and you fall over. It's really strange.
Well, I hope you're being careful with your power tools, if you'll pardon the expression.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this week the three of us are getting together. Well, because we're going on tour, chaps, and the tour is getting closer and closer. So after a long gap of not very many gigs at all, really, we are looking forward to getting our faces and our songs and our stories out in the front of people's faces, and hopefully that they'll enjoy it. So,
and our power tools.
Yes, and Kev's going to get his power tools out if everyone's interested in that.
Attacking my acoustic guitar with a Makita.
We are taking our American Wilderness Odyssey project on tour, so around the UK, and we're looking forward to performing some gigs. So do come and join us if you can. Tickets are available, and all the dates are on the website at thelongroadband.net/gigs. We're in the Midlands, we're in the South, we're in the Southeast, we're in the Southwest, we're in London. Going to lots of places, so do join us if you can. But I suppose it got us thinking about, live music that we've missed so much. What is it that makes a great gig? Whether that's as a performer or as an audience member, what are those magic ingredients that make a gig great or memorable? And for some reason, I'm just instantly taken back to our Dublin Castle gig, Steve, as a performer, and just the bonkers night that was, and all the elements that made that an amazing night, with the sweat dripping from the ceiling, the awesome sound guy who looked like he was, just couldn't be bothered with anybody in the world, but did an absolutely sterling job of managing the sound. And then finishing the night off, finding out that one of the other bands had vomited on my keyboard. It was just such a magical evening. It'll stay with me forever.
The perfect punctuation to a gig.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I think on it, so many other little sort of edges to that fractal story. You keep on zooming in, and there's more and more things. The van broke down, and trying to find taxis at 2 a.m. and just utter carnage. But what a fabulous evening. So what about for you guys? What makes a gig?
Obviously, it's got to have a band.
Got to be a band.
Or an act, and it's got to have an audience. And those two things have got to be in the same place, literally and metaphorically, I suppose.
Yeah.
The great thing about live music, and we forget this, I think, at our peril, is live music is that communal act of audience and act, and if your audience is in the wrong place, no matter how good you are, it's bloody difficult to make a show. And if the audience is in the right place but the band is useless, the disappointment is devastating. I was reading something this week about the perils of going to Van Morrison gigs, and I'm absolutely with it. I've seen him do the greatest show ever, and then be an absolute total arse.
Yeah.
And the effect on the audience of it, he was singing all the songs, but he couldn't give a was, quite frankly, about what he was doing. And, you both got to be committed. That's the great thing about a great gig. The audience is committed and the artist is committed. That's what makes the great gig. So when I've seen that happen, there's nothing touches it. Nothing human beings can do, really.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm reminded of the words of the great. You'll remember this guy, Steve, the great Alan Smith, who used to write for the Telegraph.
Oh yeah.
And he once wrote about our old band with our old mate Emma's Midnight Express. I think it was a gig we'd done at the Horse and Groom in Derby, and he put the band respond to the audience responding to them, and is that kind of cyclical exchange between the act and the audience that can create that extra something in the room. It's that weird kind of voodoo when you can rehearse forever and you can get a song to a certain level, but until you've forged it in that white hot heat of an actual gig, it's never quite in the set. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there is that weird kind of magic that happens in a venue with a live performance. And for me, a great gig, it can hang on loads of different things. Sometimes it can just be me having the best sound I've ever had and thinking how great I sound, and then that's me. That's me. I've had a fantastic gig. The guy on the other side of the stage can be literally having a nervous breakdown because his monitors have exploded. But I had a great gig. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Or it can be literally, I can sound horrific, but the audience have gone absolutely bananas. It's like, well, okay then, So it can be a number of things, but when all of those things collide.
But you're right, Kev, that we can be in a room rehearsing and playing our socks off to nobody, and it feel a certain way, but you can't, you genuinely can't practice what it feels like to do that in front of people.
No.
Because as much as you say to yourself, right, even if we say, right, real proper dress rehearsal here, you're going to, we're going to make it feel as real as possible. It's like, it's not as real, and it's not real until you've got those 100 people in the audience, even 5 people in the audience, it changes things.
It does.
You can't put your finger on what it is that changes, and you can't reproduce there's not a sound effect you can play into the room that makes that, or a visual effect, or a smell or anything. It's the fact that humans are in a room together.
It creates a tension. That's not necessarily a negative thing, but it creates a tension. Is that what's coming, what's happening?
Yeah. It happens all the time. When you're in a room of people just chatting, milling around, sitting around before a gig, and then something happens and everyone starts to go quiet.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's because the house lights have gone down, a very clear indication something's going to happen. But sometimes it just happens naturally. It's sort of around the time when the gig is supposed to start, everyone goes quiet. And then there's a whole series of sort of unwritten rules, sort of training that we're all put through about how you approach that then, and then you sit down, you're quiet,
get your drinks ready, get your seat ready. The air of expectancy.
There's that lovely,
and then that first moment when it is quiet and the first sound happens, whether that's applause because somebody's walking on stage and somebody off stage starts the applause, or the first sound of the first word of a monologue, or the first note of a thing. It's the moment before that happens where that tension is.
Yeah.
And human beings love that, I think.
Yeah.
I think we love this tension and release.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's getting those. Is it
Absolutely.
dopamine? Is that the good one? The hit to
I
the brain
think so,
that we love?
That's the one.
There's a lovely French word, so it's in English as well. All the posh words are French, aren't they, in English? Complicity. It's that idea that you're kind of all in on a secret.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that feeling. A great gig has that sense of all being in on a secret, and you realise you're never going to be able to explain this to anybody else. You could go home and you go, "That's a great gig, blah 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 blah," but you cannot. You cannot.
No, you can't put that into words.
I always think it's really sad. The sad these days when you go to a gig and you see people holding their iPhones up or other phones are available, videoing the gig, and you think, what are you doing that for? You're not here if you're worried about whether you're getting a good picture of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my favourite stories of getting that complicity going, years and years ago, with my old mate Tim. We were playing a gig, and Tim was a fiery fiddler. He was a really good fiddle player, and we did this tune, as usual, from a purist point of view, playing it far too fast. We got to the end of the piece, and it was a pub packed. I mean, it was a big pub, concert room in a pub. And they just went wild. I mean, it absolutely went wild. People were standing and shouting and whistling and
Rending of clothes and underpants.
Yeah, it was like that. But I thrashed my guitar within an inch of its life, and I was sort of bending down like that, just slightly tuning it. And all of a sudden, I heard everyone go really quiet. And I turned around, and Tim was balancing the bow of his fiddle on his first finger, and it was just hanging there, and everyone's going, oh. and then he took his finger away.
Oh, God. I thought you were going to say something else.
And the bow just hung in the air. And at this point, everyone's going, what's going on here? And then I looked up, and he'd seen there was a beam above it, above the stage, an old wooden beam, it was an old pub, and it had a nail in it. And he'd hooked it on the... But that moment, and then people started to work out, what was happening there. And, again, the laughter. I mean, he conned the whole pub. It was beautiful because you couldn't.
Yeah, those kind of happenstance.
Any of that.
Yeah, those moments.
You couldn't take that and bottle it. You couldn't do a film of it. You couldn't.
I had exactly that.
His
I had
instinct.
exactly that at a gig with Tubular Arts back in the 80s, and my bass accidentally became entangled in the tassels of the curtains above.
Of the curtains,
and it was like starting to feed back, and I thought, dare I do this? And I just walked away from it and thought, don't fall, for Christ's sake, don't try. and it literally hung it like that. It hung in the air, and the audience are going bonkers. You can't script that stuff. They're just moments, They're just beautiful moments.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love it.
I think that's the thing that for us that we've missed about the live. It's all well and good, doing the online shows is fine, it's good. Being able to practice ourselves sort of in private, that's fine, getting together, but actually being in a room with other people who haven't yet been on the journey, and we're going to take them on the journey.
Yeah,
And
well, you can hear. I
that-
think you
that-
can hear the enthusiasm with which we're speaking about live work, how much we've missed it, and how important.
Yeah,
it is,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was listening to I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago of somebody interviewing Laurie Anderson. You aware of Laurie Anderson?
Yeah. Superman. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. American artist, musician, but she calls herself an artist. Really, does all kinds of stuff, not just musical, visual, and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And one of the things she was saying was, and I need to listen to it again because it was really, at the time, it really struck me as to what any of us are trying to do with making music. And she's just saying, look, first of all, you've got to do it for yourself, because you can't make art for other people, because it just doesn't work. It's inauthentic and doesn't get you anywhere. But all you can then do is offer it out to people, and people take part in it, and what they're going to take and how they're going to take part in it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else in human interaction that's like making art and sharing it. And it's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And that's what we've been missing the last
Absolutely.
18 months.
Yeah.
Is the terror and the thrill of both sides of it, and it's going to be amazing to be out there and getting both of those in varying measures, but hopefully it all equals out.
On the road again, boys. On the road again.
Indeed.
It's
Can't
gonna
wait.
be-
See you all out there.
yeah. Song in the Mix time again, where I offer up another item to my bandmates, Kev and Bishop, to see what they think. It's actually a bit like Bake Off, waiting for the glare of disapproval because I've got the filling wrong or my eggs are too sticky. Well, this week my song is called Nowhere Town, which I just finished. I mean like 2 minutes ago. It was inspired by my daughter Lucy, who's just got back from a holiday to Halifax. Now, there's nothing wrong with Halifax at all. I mean, it's a fine little proud northern town, but it's not necessarily a holiday destination. But times must, I guess, times must. But going to Halifax made me think of all those small industrial towns of the north. Actually, I'm beginning to think when we say towns of the north, we mean anywhere but the southeast of England, which, as you know, is still run by Normans, people with double-barreled Wally-type names who have a history of declaring places beyond the pale. I live in the English Midlands, and as far as they're concerned, we don't exist at all. I have never heard, ever in my entire life, the phrase, those Midland towns, or those people of the Midlands, or the Midland sense of humour, or. But anyway, our towns, Midlands or North or otherwise, we have lots of them. Little places, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people. They usually grew up because somebody had planted a factory there first, or next door to a little village where one day they're selling milk, butter and cheese, and the next they're making steam engines. But over the years, of course, those reasons to be have disappeared. The mills have closed, the mines have closed, steelworks have closed, the engineering works have gone, the potteries have closed, and we're left wondering where we've been and reminding ourselves frequently, as most people think down there, we are nowhere. Nowhere town, might be a dreamer, most likely you're a clown. 'cause it's always closing time in the smoky pantomime. My heart is given over to searching summertime in this nowhere town. Sun is sinking, it's just falling down. Like the works across the road and the rest of this postcode, someone ends up crying in every episode again. Shut the line some time ago when the last train steamed away. Locked the doors on the picture house, showing 50 Shades of Grey. And the Virgin Mary rang out her bell, the moon slid from the sky. Someone laughed in the shadows dark, murmured, "That's a lie." That's a lie. Nowhere town, gotta keep on drinking just to turn it around. My mama said, no matter where you've been, don't slide right into sin. Keep your hands out of your pockets, watch out for Mickey Finn in this nowhere town. Just listen to the mournful, lonesome sounds of the old men in the choir who with their memories conspire to hold it all together, not sink into the mire again. They shut the line some time ago when the last train steamed away. They locked the doors on the picture house, showing 50 Shades of Grey. And the Virgin Mary rang out her bell, the moon slid from the sky. And someone laughed in the shadows dark, murmured, "That's a lie. That's a lie. Oh, that's a lie. You know that's a lie. That's a lie."
Hello and welcome again to Kev's Cafe Corner. You join me on the Camino. It's Friday, October the 23rd, after the horrific previous day. Feeling more or less recovered after a good night's sleep, I nevertheless toyed with the idea of a day off, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it, not quite yet. So it was time to leave Aberdeen and make for Villalba, being as I had itchy feet rather than tired ones. The weather remained reasonably kind. I stopped for lunch and I had the rare experience of crossing above the motorway instead of beneath it for once. I arrived in Villalba around 17:30. 21 kilometres done today. After the marathon 35 kilometres yesterday, it wasn't too shabby. And my body responded by crashing out immediately for 2 hours once I'd been allocated my bed. I decided to stay here for 2 nights to recuperate. But if I'm really honest with myself, it's not just that. As the goal becomes ever more tangible, ever more present in my mind, I just don't want it to end. Saturday, October the 24th. There's a few people around now. A little Spanish guy who seems to be cooking all the time and offering food to everybody. Lily and her owner made an appearance again. And 3 Germans who I came to know as Clemens, Alisa and Tim. I wandered around Villalba a little on my rest day, though not too much, having learned the lessons of Gijon. I had a lovely lunch at one of the few open cafes and bought some fruit, etc. for tomorrow's journey. Luckily, there was a fridge at the hostel, so I could keep it all fresh. Sunday, October the 25th, I awoke around 6 a.m. refreshed. I decided to go for a 30k stretch again,
and I left the albergue at 7:30 a.m. It was a very still morning, and it felt good to be out on the road so early. I left the village and walked across old stone bridges, past moss-covered houses and outbuildings rendered indistinct in the morning haze. I headed down a forest path, taking me away from whatever civilization still slumbered at this hour, and headed deeper into the greenery. Up ahead of me was a glade, eerily lit in the morning sunlight, and I suddenly saw two shapes stood still. They were two young deer. I caught my breath. It was a beautiful, almost holy sight. Time, for the briefest moment, stood still, and as we turned to regard each other, there was a connection. Then, before I could even get a photograph, they were gone in one graceful movement, disappearing into the undergrowth. I felt as if I'd been given one of nature's gifts. It stirred something in me, and I headed onward with renewed energy. Very little of today's journey was on the road, but after encountering the deer, I had to pound the tarmac a bit until Barmond. There, I found KM 101, a fabulous burger place recommended to me by my Camino friend Emile. It didn't disappoint. The owner, Jesus, was an oracle of the Camino. I needed his advice, as I'd been cautioned that if I took the wrong route to Alagoa, I could notch up over 40k. Jesus' info was super accurate, to the kilometre. He told me exactly where to turn off the road onto the trail and said that at a certain point, 2 Camino markers were set, side by side, and I should follow the left one. I did just that, but not before getting absolutely soaked, again, walking the road. In fact, despite a few sunny spells, it rained all day. The way through the forest, though, was beautiful, like Rivendell. Hidden chapels, stairways seemingly raised by sorcerers out of the roots, and brightly coloured moss and lichen carpeting the stones. But I'm forgetting myself. Let's rewind a few K to a point back on the road out of Barmond. I arrived at the 99.987 Camino marker, and just a short distance back from that was a homemade stone marker for 100 kilometres, and a small pile of keepsakes left by pilgrims. I dropped down to double figures, less than 100 kilometres to go. What a feeling! So, back to the trail. Soaking wet, I continued on through the forest. As I finally emerged into a village, a small dog befriended me and walked by my side for the entire length of the village. I guess he'd been employed as the official pilgrim escort. I arrived at Alagoa around 4:30, a really good walking day despite the weather. It was a very modern albergue attached to an old pub cafe, nicely designed. I'd arrived ahead of the Germans and immediately got my sleeping bag, boots, clothes, etc. out to air and hopefully dry, and gratefully jumped in the shower. About 2 hours later, the Germans arrived and seemed surprised I'd arrived ahead of them. We all chilled out when we'd settled and sat around the communal table. I discovered they were Tim and Alyssa from near Dortmund and Clemens, an 18-year-old from Munster. I said to Tim, "I know that area. I've played at the Grugerhalle in Essen." He nodded and then seemed lost in thought for a while. I could see the wheels in his head turning. "That must mean," he said, "that you're kind of famous." "Kind of," I replied. It was funny. They were too young to remember Christie, of course, but it was fun to see their faces as I showed them the ZDF appearance. The young lad, Clemens, I'd discovered, had walked all the way from his hometown in Munster in Germany. I think he'd set off in June. Tim and Alyssa had taken him under their wing for a couple of nights after they'd heard he'd slept on church steps, bus shelters and even goose farms. Alyssa worked for a German radio station in his area and so organised to do an interview with him as local interest. As we were sat chatting, the guy who'd checked us in brought us little skillets of hot roast chestnuts. A nice gesture. We all decided we'd walk together tomorrow to Sobrado, 27.5 kilometres away. So let's see what tomorrow brings.
So, in the intro for today's Bishop's Daily Bread segment, it was described as the therapy of making croissant. Now, I'm not really sure if it is that, but who knows? Let's see what unfolds. I think this is my second attempt at making croissant from scratch, which was actually several months ago, back in May 2021. Luckily, I take pictures of just about any baked product that goes through my oven these days, so I can usually pinpoint exactly when something was. My first attempt at making croissants, however, was back in June 2020, when lockdown here in the UK was really starting to bite. Now, both attempts were inspired by a friend of mine who posts on their Instagram profile the results of their baking efforts, and pristine, glorious croissants appeared one day. So attempt number one back in 2020 did not go well. Perhaps the recipe, perhaps the baker, perhaps the circumstances, perhaps all three. Attempt number two, however, in 2021, much better. And now I actually sought out the recipe that my friend uses for their croissants, and it was different in a few key aspects, so perhaps that's what helped. Making croissants, it really is sort of mathematical, really, but with moments of sort of creativity, I suppose, like most baking, really. Perhaps that's why I quite enjoy it. Now, unfortunately, podcasts being an audio medium, I can only really attempt to describe the results. But these 2021 croissants, they look pretty great, to be honest. Sort of striped, almost diamond-shaped, rather than perhaps the crescent that some might go for. Texturally, the outside was good. I feel like they could have been a touch flakier or crispier. The insides were nearly all spot on in my book. Very occasionally one was slightly doughier than I'd have liked, but lots of air, lots of lightness in general. I was very pleased. They went very well with the obligatory Long Road apricot jam. Now, I'm really not sure why this apricot jam has entered into the Long Road world as obligatory, but it seems to be. Anyway, so where does the therapy bit come in? I'm sure therapy isn't the right word, but it's certainly therapeutic, making croissants, the long process of it, all by hand. So working through something that you're not an expert in, and being fine with not being an expert at it. Improving at what you're doing, learning as you go, little things, big things sometimes. Getting better at it, getting better results. Attempt 2 was better than attempt 1, and I'm sure attempt 3 will be better still. People like what you've achieved, and you can share in the joy of that, especially when it's something handmade and it's food-based, and that's just deliciousness all round. But as good as the attempts are, there is also that desire and the scope to get better, improve, to make the good even better. And all this adds up to be one of those sort of, great strands in the tapestry of life that makes it all tick along nicely. I'd recommend it. Have a go at making your own croissants. But definitely read the entire method for croissants before you start, so you know how many days of your life this is going to go on for. It's not that you're working for days, it just the whole process takes from start to finish a few days. What time of day you should, or more specifically shouldn't, start at, so that you don't end up at 11:30 at night, then having to wait for a couple of hours for something to prove, and then you've got to do something before you can leave it for longer. And also make sure you know how many large baking trays and how large you'll need them. And perhaps the most important thing of it all, can you fit these large baking trays in your fridge? All the rest, the types of flour, the types of butter, it all comes along. But some of those practical bits, they need to be front and centre, I think. In many ways, I'm already regretting not having made attempt 3 sooner, as I'm fairly sure I'd learn more quicker that way, doing the same thing but more frequently. I'd retain more of the little tricks and tips you find yourself learning as you do something with your hands. But anyway, attempt 2, these croissants, they were a great step along the journey, and I look forward to the next croissant adventure. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening wherever in the world you are. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and YouTube. The next episode will be out next Friday. If you fancy buying us a coffee, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/thelongroadband. It's dead simple, just to drop us a few quid to support what we do. It even accepts Apple Pay and Google Pay. Super easy. All of our music and merch is on Bandcamp, where you can help support a positive ecosystem for the music industry. Downloads, streaming, vinyls, CDs, the companion book, it's all there. So just head to thelongroadband.bandcamp.com. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreons, and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Stuart Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your ongoing support. If you'd like to support us, become a Vagabonder. You'll get free digital stuff and merchandise in the post if you want it. Help us create something different, something that entertains and something that inspires others. Join us on the journey and release the vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on The Long Road. Remember, the world isn't beige. It's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with The Long Road. Bye for now.